What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B Shafe Daily. Brendan Schaefer recording here before my trek down to Birmingham, Alabama for Thursday's game between the Cardinals and Giants down at Rickwood Field. Going to be a real exciting event, and I got to get on the road here before too long. So breaking this one down here briefly as we talk about a Cardinals loss to the Marlins on Wednesday. What a frustrating not only game, but series for the Cardinals as they drop 2 of 3 to the lowly Miami Marlins in a situation that felt tailor-made for the Cardinals to cement their status above 500. They instead finished this series below 500 for the season, a place that they're all too familiar with the way things have been going. They're 36 and 37, and if you thought the wild card situation was bunched up before, well, it's even more so now. With, as I'm recording this, and I'm recording this a little bit earlier than releasing it on Wednesday afternoon, there are literally 5 teams tied at a half game back of both the Cardinals and the D-backs who are holding down number 2 and number 3 wildcard spots in the National League as of this recording. So yeah, that's 7 teams for 2 spots, all 7 of them within a half game of one another, and all 7 of them behind the 500 mark. The Cubs and Reds a game and a half back. So really 9 teams are in contention. As the Mets have caught fire, they did exactly what we said they'd have to do to get their names back into this race. They've won 7 in a row, and they're right now in the thick of it. What a mess in the NL, and the Cardinals had every opportunity this weekend to try and space a little bit of distance between them and the field, and they couldn't do it. And it comes through some of it no fault of their own, and through other parts of it, certainly things they could have done better. The part that's really very little to be done about, there was nobody that could have necessarily anticipated Kyle Gibson throwing his warm-up pitches and feeling a tweak in his back that he wasn't comfortable with, couldn't finish his delivery and rotate all the way through, as he explained in some video that aired on postgame of Bally Sports Midwest. It just was one of those things. And so now the question will be, what happens over the next couple of weeks with Gibson? Is Gibby able to retain his spot in the rotation with a reworked order of operations, or is he going to have to hit the IL? I do see something now that maybe we'll have an answer for by the time you listen to this podcast, but that Tink Hence posted an Instagram from Birmingham. That doesn't strike me necessarily as something that's indicative of him being activated for the game on Thursday. For one, he hasn't pitched since June 5th. I think he left that game with cramps and still hasn't pitched. And now, even as I talk about it, I'm reading this from Jeff Jones of the Belleville News-Democrat. Tink Hence is in Birmingham, I'm told, because MLB requested appearances from prominent black prospects in both organizations as part of the celebration of the Negro Leagues this week. So basically, Tink Hence is going to be part of the celebration as a prominent prospect with the Cardinals who is a black American, and that is the nature of that situation. It'll be celebratory times for the history, and Willie Mays is obviously going to be front and center in spirit, certainly, after he passes away at the age of 93 yesterday. Really unfortunate timing, but also for as unfortunate as it is that Willie Mays will not be able to be there in an event that will be celebrating him, he'll be memorialized in a really special way, I have to imagine. So we're still very excited to get to see what happens down there in the celebration of the history of a great historic venue in our sport at Rickwood Field. And so I'm excited to get down there, but that's the explanation for Tink Hence. It's not that the Cardinals are trying to pull a fast one and start him. In fact, he hasn't pitched in 2 weeks, and it might be nice to, I don't know if he'll speak to the media, but it might be nice to know how things are going for him in his progress from the cramps. They've obviously, throughout the time that he spent with the Cardinals organization, taken things very slowly and been very careful when there's really anything to speak of. They're going to make sure to not push through that with Tink Hence. But no, I don't think he's the mystery starter for tomorrow. Andre Pallante has been announced, I believe, by the Cardinals earlier today. But there was a time in this game on Wednesday where I thought that the Cardinals might need to bump Andre Pallante up a day and put him into this game as a long reliever. Because with Kyle Gibson unable to go, the Cardinals, about 20 minutes or whatever it was before the game, said, yep, I think we're going to go ahead and go with Matthew Liberatore because that's our best option, which I'm not entirely sure is true. You could have made the decision to push up Pallante, but they've already yanked Pallante around a little bit. But they've really yanked Matthew Liberatore around, and I think of the two, you'd consider Liberatore to have had the higher prospect pedigree. I don't know that weighs too much into a decision where you're just under the gun and you have to make a choice. But Liberatore comes out, very little notice, a guy that's already been through the ringer, as we talked about, whether it's starting and then he's relieving and he's doing both in the same week. That's another example now of it happening. But today was truly emergency circumstances. Any number of ways this could have gone that would have been better than the Cardinals finding out right before the game that Kyle Gibson is unable to pitch. Like we talked about last night on Be Safe Daily, and we did a live stream on YouTube. We talked about this needing to be a day where the Cardinals needed a lot of innings from Kyle Gibson, 6 or 7 to be able to spare the bullpen that was already taxed coming into the game. And wouldn't you know it, fate had decided, well, it's actually going to be a bullpen game. So you're not really going to get that luxury. And the Cardinals didn't get the luxury, and then to make matters worse, they lost the game. And to make matters double worse, Nolan Arenado got injured, hit on the pitch by an elbow. Thankfully, it was ruled as a contusion rather than the instantaneous, he fractured his arm that we got with Wilson Contreras a few weeks ago. That hopefully is going to spare Arenado an IL trip, but I can't say for sure. Like, he was in some serious pain, and the way the trainer was holding the arm braced against Arenado's body coming off the field, it didn't look great. So to hear contusion is about the best news you could have had, but we'll see. We will wait and see what further comes of that, because that'll swell up overnight. That'll be some motion issues that he's probably having to deal with, and we'll just see what it ends up being for Nolan Arenado. But on the pitching side of things, my interpretation of Matthew Liberatore today is, and I saw some Cardinals fans just angry at the world on social media and complaining, and I understand that this was not ideal circumstances. This sucks. For the Cardinals to lose this series is really, really crappy. It's just not what anybody would have wanted for playing against these bad teams, to come away from the series against the White Sox with a loss and the Marlins with a loss, and you split with the Rockies. It's unacceptable. Totally behind that. But specific to this game, I can't say that Matthew Liberatore didn't do his job, because he did more than his job. On 10 minutes, 20 minutes notice, go out there and throw 3 2/3 innings, keeping the Cardinals in the game for that stretch. Pretty remarkable, and even more so when you consider how bad it began. 3 extra base hits to begin the game, home run, double. And for that to be where you spot the Marlins 2 runs, and for the Cardinals to make a go of this, I really did feel like against all odds, because I thought, I literally tweeted, and it made me look kind of stupid maybe, but I said, can they forfeit? Because this Cardinal team, the reason behind that wasn't because I said, well, they have no chance to win, but it felt like, are they really going to be able to get 24 or 27 outs in this game? The answer ultimately was no, as Ryan Fernandez takes the L in the tie game there in the 9th inning as the Marlins come around to score a run on the hit to Burleson. He had a chance maybe to make a play at the plate, and he bobbled the ball, and that was all she wrote. But, yeah, the Cardinals just didn't seem like a team, as Liberatore was allowing homer, double to start this game, that had really any chance of being able to get through this thing unscathed from a pitching standpoint. I legitimately thought that there was going to be a position player at some point in this game taking the mound. But to Libby's credit, man, he settled in and retired 10 in a row at one point. Basically, those 3 hits he had to start the game, he then allowed 1 walk throughout the rest of his outing, and that was it. 1 strikeout, 3 2/3. Roycroft came on. He looked a lot better than the last couple of times we'd seen him, which mostly were issues with his fielding. His pitching has looked quite good, 3.07 ERA. John King came in. He did end up getting spotted for a run, which obviously ends up being a pretty important difference-making run. But how about Kyle Leahy, 2 1/3, scoreless, 1 hit allowed, no walks, and 2 strikeouts to lower his ERA to 4.07. The Cardinals have announced, it was according to, I guess they maybe didn't announce it, but it was reported on the television broadcast on Bally today that Giovanni Gallegos would be activated for tomorrow, which is no surprise because they need rested arms, and it doesn't really matter who you decide you're going to take out of the mix. They got to have somebody, and Gio probably ends up pitching tomorrow, which could be good, could be bad. Good in that if it is going to go bad, they might as well know now and maybe not try to string this thing out too long. And if it goes well, then maybe the Cardinals get their Gio back, which would be a benefit if it can happen. I'm a little skeptical that it's going to happen, but he's got the leverage of he's been around for 5-6 years, and they're not just going to throw him out on the street without at least giving him one more crack at it. The problem is Kyle Leahy throwing 2 1/3, 28 pitches. I wonder if he's the guy that gets bumped. And if he does, it is totally not deserved. He has done such a nice job for the Cardinals, and it would just be a rough business decision of sorts. There are other ways that this could go. Like, we'll see what happens with Gibson. If he ends up needing IL, then that's maybe the way that you find a way to get Giovanni Gallegos back on the roster for the time being. It's anybody's guess at this point what is going to happen, and maybe not at this point, because as you're listening to this, the Cardinals may have already announced the move. We will see. But as of this moment, I haven't seen anything, so we're just kind of speculating and wondering what it could end up being. But for the Cardinals, it's certainly not the spot you want to be in to legitimately have needed 6-7 innings today from your starter, and you get 0 innings from your starter. Brutal. And I'm just checking out some of the tweets across the timeline. Jeff Jones had noticed that Chris Roycroft was down on his velocity at least a couple of miles per hour compared to the average, which I don't always pay attention to that as the first and foremost thing, but I think you do have to be on high alert right now just because of the situation with Gallegos coming back and knowing the Gibson situation is up in the air. There could be certain ways that the Cardinals look to massage and maneuver this thing. And either way, if you send somebody down or you send somebody to the IL, it's going to be 15 days for a pitcher before he's able to come back. Now, the difference is obviously if it's going to be with an injury designation, the guy would end up having to miss at least a number of days before you start his rehab assignment. Otherwise, that would look like kind of a fake thing where you're just throwing the guy a bone to say, hey, we'll pay you the extra big league money to be on the IL instead of just optioning you to AAA. So that would be probably frowned upon by the league. But I am a little bit curious to see where the Cardinals go and who they end up sending down. But the moral of the story today is just a huge disappointment to drop the series that the Cardinals lose to Miami. And checking out, I was reading Jeff's tweet, but now looking, like Roycroft hit 94, 95 toward the end of his outing. So I don't know that that's too much of a thing. He was more in the 93 area later on, but I don't know. I think he's probably going to be okay in terms of that, but you never know. Something to keep an eye on. Roycroft or Leahy, though, either of those guys having to go down is going to be really a tough pill to swallow because I don't think either of them are more helpful to this bullpen than Giovanni Gallegos. But that's a story for another day as we continue to hone in on this loss. Let's do it from the offensive side of things. Like I said, Libby going almost 4 innings. He gave up it was a brutal start to the game, but the way he was able to settle in, I think it kept a position player from having to pitch in this game, and it kept the Cardinals in striking distance. Also doing so was Nolan Gorman. Boy, oh boy, did he need a homer, and he found one today to dead center. OPS is still bleeding out to 715. Average is down to 202, but he did get that one. He had 2 more Ks today, too. But one good swing is better than no good swings, and so the Cardinals get that from him. Donovan had some really tough plate appearances, and he was able to get a base knock for an RBI in this game. Carp went 2 for 4. Wynn had a hit. Goldie had a hit. And Pajes had a base hit as well. Arenado, 2 for 3 with a run scored until he leaves the game. So that's the shame of it, is that he was starting to see it a little bit. Cardinals, though, on the day, 1 for 10 with RISP. It's the same old song and dance that offensively this team has just not been able to consistently put together the types of at-bats in clutch situations with runners on base. Not only runners on base, but runners ready to be knocked in. I think the majority of the 9, or how many left on base today for the Cardinals, because there may have been some double plays that I'm forgetting about here. Great attendance, by the way, for the Marlins. They go from 8,800 yesterday to over 11,000 today for the day game. 8 left on base for the Cardinals. I believe at least 5, maybe 6 of them were runners in scoring position left on base. It's the same old story for the Cardinals, and so you have to wonder if the pitching staff is dodging injuries and dodging these unfortunate situations, and they're tapped out in the bullpen. When is the time going to come that the offense is able to be the group that carries the load for the Cardinals? We have just not seen it, and we're still kind of waiting to see it. But I don't know how long you can expect a season to go along without seeing it before you just go, hey, maybe they don't have it. Maybe this isn't the group that's going to have it. And you can talk about every which way to change the lineup up, but there aren't anybody at the bottom of the lineup that you can really think is worthy and meriting going in that 3-4-5. The 3-4-5 today had 4 hits, 4 of the Cardinals' 10. But for a game that you had 10 hits and you had that many ducks on the pond, to not be able to cash in is just a crying shame. I mean, it's just, they needed it. They did it yesterday, and of course you waste it with the Lance Lynn start, and that's a concern because he's been rough recently. But to then just have it for one day, and then you say, all right, we'll go back to kind of our norm of we'll get a bunch of hits, we'll scatter them, we'll even put guys in scoring position, but largely we're going to leave them out there, strand them. You out-hit the Marlins. You lose 4-3 in the 9th inning in a game that, frankly, it felt like in the first inning you were going to lose it by 10. And so the fact that you played well enough to keep it close, but not well enough to win it, is a mortal disappointment. You do have a few stray things to take away that are positives. Like I said, Gorman, it was maybe a one-off, but you had a home run swing that you're just going to need to have from him moving forward. The fact that he's got 16 homers, but I think we largely feel as negative about his season as we collectively do. And let me know if I'm off base about this. If you're like, no, Gorman's actually done his job. 16 homers is great, and he's ultimately on pace for 35 or 40, and that's going to be really impressive. It's empty calories, though, man, when it's a 202 average, that part's not as big of a deal. I want to see him hitting 230, though, 225, 230 at a minimum. But the 715 OPS, it's like, for a guy that's going to be hitting 35, 40 home runs, you'd like to think that he is doing a little bit more and finding a little bit of other ways to impact the game. But that's why I call it empty calories, because it's not that those individual home runs can't be important. Like if the Cardinals had won the game today, that run actually comes up really huge. And it was obviously the reason they were tied going into the bottom of the ninth to have a bottom of the ninth in the first place, where the Marlins ultimately won this game. But by empty calories, I just mean when you don't have the rate stats, you don't have a decent average, your on base and slugging is kind of so-so relative to the amount of home runs you hit. That means he's not getting other base hits as often. He's not hitting doubles. He's not taking his walks, and he's striking out a lot. So that's just a concern for a guy that, like, he's your cleanup bat. So during the times he's going great, it's wonderful to have him there. During the lean times, which had been the last week and a half, it's not as wonderful. And now you see a game where Alec Burleson goes 0 for 5 with 3 Ks. Like, the guys that you had sort of gotten to thinking, okay, they're good to go, they're going to be consistent. Well, I mean, those guys are going to have off days. You can't expect guys to have a 162-game hitting streak. There are going to be days where it doesn't work out for them. But just to think that consistently we're not seeing those run-scoring rallies. When the Cardinals scored their runs yesterday, it was under an isolated situation against Rodri Munoz, who has really significantly struggled against left-handed bats. The Cardinals stacked their lineup with them, and they hit 3 home runs, 2 of them coming from a lefty in those first few innings. But it felt like a one-off because I said, well, how are you going to respond to Yanni Chirinos tomorrow? Well, we got our answer today, and the Cardinals just did not quite get enough done against him. Had the 2 runs there in inning number 2, one being off of that Gorman homer, the other coming from, I believe that was when the RBI by Donovan took place. And that was really all the Cardinals were able to do against another starter that he just came up fresh from AAA. He's 30 years old, journeyman, and coming up straight from AAA. Again, the Cardinals not able to capitalize on what I think would have been a very favorable pitching matchup. Obviously, not favorable when the Cardinals ultimately didn't have a starter that they used, but favorable in terms of being able to get to Chirinos, and they just didn't do it. So we'll see what the Cardinals are able to come up with now that they move along to Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. Cardinals taking on the Giants, I believe 6:10 the first pitch time on Thursday night down there in Alabama, where I've never been to Alabama, so it'll be fun. I'm taking off right after finishing recording this to make the drive down. I'll get a little bit of sleep in the morning, and then I'll head on over to the ball yard for what should be a really special event. And I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening as far as the Cardinals competitively on the field. We are getting some reports in just now as I went to wrap this up post KTGR Big Show. Ari Alexander is a sports reporter down in Houston, and he maybe broke some news here regarding a call-up that the Cardinals are looking to make. Now, as of this recording, we don't have a lot of information yet, but I'm going to share it with you anyway because he's a reporter out of Houston, and Adam Kloffenstein is from that area originally, and sources have told Ari Alexander, the TV reporter down there in the Houston area, that Adam Kloffenstein is being called up by the Cardinals. Now, Alexander put in the tweet that Kloffenstein is expected to make his MLB debut on Thursday against the Giants. I'm not 100% sure that that'll be indicative of him starting the game. That could still be Andre Palante. It would be 3 days rest if they were to go with Kloffenstein. They really don't have any reason to unless they're bumping Palante back or there's something else that we're not aware of at this point in time. It is going to mean, though, probably some bad news for some of those guys that pitched today. Like Leahy's thrown 4 innings now in 2 days. Liberatore has thrown 4 1/3 in 2 days after pitching last night and then throwing 3 2/3 as a starter right after that. Just brutal the way that he has been yanked around. But this was kind of out of necessity. There could be some rotating going on with the Cardinal relief corps, and I hate to think that guys like Libby and Leahy are going to potentially be the victims of that because they gave the team some much-needed innings today. Roycroft pitched both days as well, potentially is somebody that ends up getting on the chopping block here because Gallegos is coming. Kloffenstein apparently is coming as well. That could mean Kyle Gibson's on the IL. Like, that could be the aspect of this that happens, and the Cardinals just say, look, Kloffenstein, we need you to come down and be ready to piggyback with Palante because we may just need the innings. So probably by the time you hear this podcast, you'll know more about that situation than I did while I recorded it, but that is something that's in the air as well as things get rolling down there at Rickwood Field down in Birmingham. So that's really going to do it for this quick edition of B-Shape Daily. Appreciate you guys for joining me as always. Like I said, this finally was a short episode when I promised that it would be one because I have got to hit the road. But we will plan to have an episode. I had my wife even buy me a USB mic that I can hopefully plug in on Thursday night to the laptop directly in order to have some decent sound quality. But we will talk Rickwood Field, Cardinals, Giants, and everything going on down in Birmingham tomorrow night. It'll be late before I get it posted on Thursday night, but you can't expect something barring the unforeseen. So appreciate you guys as always for joining, and we'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.